I thought, where are these boys?
We were too late.
Oh, where do you come from?
There.
Oh,
we were
really?
just
What were you doing out
sitting
there?
there.
Oh, okay. Okay, we're going to talk about the correspondent, the role of design in the correspondent. You're welcome to tweet your questions, and I thought it's not scripted, but if you raise your hand, we might send up a microphone in the room as well, because you probably have better questions than me. But let me start. Who are you? And who are you first? What did your father do for a living? And why did you do? No, not why did you do this. Who are you?
Well, I am Rob Wijnberg, and I have been a journalist for more than 10 years now. Started writing at the Telegraaf, popular newspaper in Holland. Eventually grew out of that.
You were very young. You were the youngest guy who had a column in the Telegraaf, right?
Yes, I was 19. And then I went on becoming an editor for NRC Next, which was then a new newspaper in Holland, the morning edition of NRC Handelsblad. And then I became chief editor of NRC Next. And
you were the youngest chief editor in Europe.
Exactly.
How old were you then? This is a motivational talk for all the young people.
Yeah.
How old were you then?
27.
Well, it took a while.
What?
It took 8 years, but okay.
Yeah, it took me 8 years, yes. And then I was chief editor for 2 years. Then was politely fired, let's say. And then I thought, okay, let's start my own newspaper. Online platform. And we did.
Yeah. Who are you, Harald Dunnink?
I'm Harald Dunnink. I founded Momkai in 2002.
How old were you?
I was 20.
You're a bit of a school dropout, huh?
Well, I wasn't fond of school. And I think also with my own background in digital, school was always kind of a couple of years behind. So you kind of learn the trade while you actually do it. So I strongly believe just go out there, had nothing to lose, just start your own company. And I wasn't used to money or whatever, so you don't earn any money in the beginning, of course, nothing. But that was a way to really learn the craft and try it out. So I've been doing that for 12 years now as a designer, and I run together with Sebastian, so that's really into our core, the combination of technology and design.
And that office is called Momkai, but you don't call it a design office. Why?
Yeah, that's always, I think, a lot of people struggle with how you frame things nowadays. So we used to say always digital creative agency, because we are mostly focused on digital. But like with Correspondent, we also do the branding, we do communication around it. So we now tend to call it creative agency, which sometimes feels a little bit broad, but yeah, you can come to the agency for creativity. So.
In our talk before, when I suggested, or when we talked about this issue where it's not being called a design studio, you were like, nobody calls a studio a design studio anymore. Something they did in the past. Is it meaningful that you say it's a creative digital agency, or the other way around, digital creative agency? How do you relate to design?
Well, when I always, like, you could also call it a design studio, but I always find, it felt a little bit like it wasn't fair to all the developers. Like the digital designs we create, it only comes to life when a developer is actually working on it and all their ideas, and they breathe life into it. So calling it just a design studio would make the designer way too much in my mind. So it's, I think my role as a designer is much more that I feel responsible for the overall experience for the user. But it's really something that I think a modern day design agency for digital should have the developers in-house.
Yeah. You don't have to worry, there will be more images. You don't worry, you think they'll keep on talking. No, we will look at more images. How did you meet? Ik moet naar achter. Yeah. How did you meet? Because it was a vibrant moment.
Yes.
You met one night, and at the end of the night it existed.
No. Well, that was interesting, quite interesting. I was thinking about starting my own online journalism platform. And all the people I asked who knew something about this said, well, Momkai is the best you can have, but don't do that because it's too expensive and they won't do it, and they will think way too big. You have to start small. Just get a developer from Poland, they said, and start out in a bar somewhere. But they kept saying, well, but if you want to try, go to Mumkai. And then I did, and after 20 minutes, we were like, let's do this. Because we had the same, the philosophy I had on journalism and what it could be coincided perfectly with the design philosophy and the development philosophy of Mumkai. So it was the shortest talk I had starting the correspondent of all.
What exactly, can you describe how it works for those people who don't know? Can you describe how this works?
What works? The platform
correspondent
itself?
Yeah.
Basically, the correspondent is a journalism platform crowdfunded. So we don't have any investors except for us. We don't have any loans, or we don't even have advertising, which is pretty rare in journalism today. We started out crowdfunding, then we got almost 20,000 members who signed up before it was there.
They signed up for a year, right?
They signed up for a year for 60 euros. And that gave us the freedom to build the platform completely like in our image, what we thought it should be. We had all the freedom. There were no investors saying you have to do this or have to do that. And then September 30th, we went online. And the basic idea is news is always about exceptions in society. It's about accidents. It's about mistakes. It's about that what grabs your attention. But what we write about or try to write about is not the exceptions, but the rules. Because we think if you want to know what is actually running the world or really happening in the world outside of those exceptions, you need to know, to understand the rules that form those exceptions. And we call that from news to new. And the way we do this is by saying to correspondents, don't follow the news agenda. This is what most journalists do. There's something in the news, and then they write about that because it's in the news. We say you make your own news. You decide what the news agenda is. And you can follow, as a member, you can follow these correspondents in their journey towards a more in-depth insights into those issues. And the design is very important for this, because the design makes it possible or not to reach those in-depth levels of information.
Let's have a look at the design. Do you have the machine?
The magic machine.
You may stand up if you feel better, because
yeah,
he's now going to talk
like
about
that
it.
always
Designers
more with
stand up if they talk about design. That's what they do. Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I can show you a little bit. I show you some different aspects of the website, the platform, so you get a better understanding of how it actually works. So what we see here is when a member is logged in, we see big visuals and a really clean interface. We see the different correspondents that they can follow, where a user has the option to actually follow these correspondents to get a deeper understanding of certain subjects. So Rob can choose certain articles that are all in the main feed, but what we see also is that here on the right-hand side, how you can actually dive into the subject with a correspondent. And this video also shows it a little bit how it adapts to all these different devices, which is that trendy responsive design word. But for us, it was the main focus was that you could read it on any device in any way possible, and still give it that clean, nice way of actually getting that information. And so here you see how that could actually happen. That mark, we haven't created that, but we can create a shop where we can put that in.
Harald, why are these people drawn?
So what we wanted to look for is a really handcrafted kind of feel. That's the same with the logo. It's based on my own handwriting, because it's very important in the whole concept that you follow these correspondents. They have their own tone of voice, and I wanted in the design also to have that touch where you kind of follow the designer, but in a very subtle way. So it's my own handwriting. and then they can't copy that, and I like that also. So it's more, it feels more original, and it's kind of the craft that I kind of miss always in Pointer.
It's also, but because we...
there it is.
I'm sorry.
No,
We have... We don't believe in objectified or objective journalism, because we don't think it's even possible or real, and where it is possible, it's misleading. So subjectivism is very important in our platform, but personalization comes in good and bad forms. So you see a lot of personalization in journalism by like adding pictures or adding more and more columns. And this was a very good way in personalizing it, but not too much, not sensationalizing or putting the author completely in the center of the journalism, but also saying, listen, this is a person that is actually talking to you, a correspondent, not a platform as a whole. Newspapers tend to talk to their audience as a newspaper, like an objective something.
I read that in the research you did how younger people are consuming news, that they have less of a relation to this objective story and more relation to the person who tells the story.
Yeah, well, basically, in general journalism, you say, okay, the story counts. The storyteller is not important, or even he should move out of the way. In journalism schools, they say, don't put yourself in the story, which is really weird, because a story completely depends on the storyteller. And even if you say there's no storyteller, like most objectified journalism does, there is a storyteller. There are choices, there's framing, there are words that you choose or not. So this is a way to be transparent about our own subjectivity.
Yeah. Let's get into one of those stories, because that's this image, right?
Yeah, so this is an example of one article where you can see that it's sometimes very subtle. So in this case, we start with the intro, then the title, then the visual. So I get the context and I get an answer of what the article will give me. It's also a different way of writing for a journalist. And we see on the right-hand side the correspondent. We see his niche, in this case, data and transparency. And with the illustrations that were created by a French colleague, which makes it, you can see that you can follow that person, but it's less hard than a photo would be. It's more of a subtle representation of a person. If we go below, in this case, just by coincidence, this image is also from a colleague, which we sometimes do. So we really look at the big picture of the project, see where we can go to build the system behind it, but also dive into certain stories, so we can craft them in a way that I personally always miss online. That the kind of craftsmanship also in the visual representation for stories.
Yeah, especially in journalism. I mean, most news sites are stock. The most hideous stock photos. I mean, when the prime minister says something, you always have the same photo of the prime minister. When something happens in the U.S., same flag.
But isn't that a financial issue as well? Because it's probably more expensive to get a crafty image than a stock image.
But it's also priority. It sends a message that you don't care about how it looks.
Do you have a relatively high budget for imagery?
No. No.
Then how are you going to do this promise?
We are being very creative in how you do it.
Yeah. So for us, it's also a chance. Like I always wanted to have a team of full-time designers. So when there's a moment, they can work on something like this, rather than with the clock ticking. One of the other designers, so we have 3 designers, including myself. She illustrates, and then we try to find a style that fits in the 2 hours, that fits the budget of the image editor. But this style is kind of expensive. But let me continue.
Yeah, please.
What you see on the right-hand side there is what we call a side note. So one of the things I personally never really liked in in reading online is that there are a lot of links that immediately say to you, "Oh, please leave this text." So I never really liked it. So I found it a distraction. And plus, that you couldn't get a understanding of where the link is actually going to. So in this case, it's a report of Newsuur, a program here in the Netherlands, and we can see on the right-hand side that the journalist can also give context to the link. So it's a subtle difference for a journalist, and it's a major difference for a reader, because you get way less distracted. There's no advertisement, that's also really good for less distraction. What we see here is, you see a little red arrow. I hope you can see it from far away. We see a glasvezel network, which means like fiber optic network. And what we do, in this case, it's already opened, but what we do is certain words, in this case, a fiber optic network, and how secret services can tap into that. We can give an extra layer of information, so you can really dive into that part. But other people, I think people that follow this correspondent often, already kind of know this story, so you can have different layers of how well you know a particular subject, and still put that in the text, and still have it in the same direction where you normally would read the text.
And I must say, this seems like something really simple and small, but it's very important, because in journalism you tend to write for everybody. So especially on paper, you have no further dimensions in where you can differentiate between what the reader knows and what he doesn't know. Now, because we can explain certain things that for some people may be very normal, for some people may be very new, you can completely write your stories in a different way. You can start for, let's say, if you want to explain something that is for experts only, start there. If you want to start somewhere that is for just a general audience, you can add information that doesn't make it too difficult to read. A lot of news isn't very interesting because it's or too general for what I want to know, or too complex for what I don't know. So this helps.
You're saying that this platform tries to really use the possibilities that the web give for distributing news.
Yes, and redefining.
Much more than the traditional papers do in their online sites.
Yeah, because most, not all, but generally the news on the web is still the same, content-wise, the same news as we get everywhere for years already.
Yeah.
But the possibilities to change actually the real fiber of news is not explored at all.
Speed it up a bit, because we have only 5 minutes left.
Let's see. So we have infographics that are fitted to the story, and which we create. So in this case, really more of a security people kind of feel, and you see that how you can use those visuals in the story. What is very important at the end is that we often link to other articles, but bring it in a big way. Then we say, okay, now you can really leave the text in a good way. And we do a call to action at the bottom, where we clearly say, so what do you think of this, or do you have tips, or so you can guide the conversation much more. So one of the updates that we just did last week is we built the comment system ourselves, but we clearly don't call them comments, we really call them contributions. In this case, now you can see there are 34 contributions and 6 conversations. So people reacting on each other, we call them conversations now. And we designed this ourselves as well, to have a way, in this case, where we see a correspondent literature joining the conversation, that you can clearly understand that that person is taking part. And now we also added that the members, only members can contribute, that they can bring their own expertise to the table, like in Quora. So that's a way to, another way to get more context of a certain debate or conversation.
Rob, do you consider it as a social platform?
Yes, this is very important, because the weird thing is that, okay, we are used to, on news platforms, generally you are used to comments that or are not worth reading or even sickening. I mean, the basic level of discussion on news sites is terrible. We actually have real experts sharing their experiences, their knowledge, sources, etc. Not only do our correspondents profit from this, but the discussions below pieces are sometimes even more interesting than the piece itself. Mm-hmm. And also the white box you see, that's a correspondent reacting to these contributions. It's a two-way communication. It's a two-way platform. Seldomly you see journalists actually talking back to their audience. And we not only encourage it, we think it's part of your job.
Somebody in the audience asked, do you know medium.com?
Yes.
Did you, yeah? And what do you think of it regarding longer contributions? Jasper Middelmeijer?
Well, we have published a few stories in English ourselves on medium.com. It's a great platform. The only difference is that it's free for almost everyone to use. Mm-hmm. We, of course, have correspondents selected by us. Mm-hmm. But the interesting part of this, and maybe that has something to do with how Medium operates, is when we see great contributions over and over and over, sometimes we could decide, well, this we don't know this person, but he's clearly an expert. Maybe he could grow into a correspondent eventually.
So what we see here is more that we set it up in a way that we created the whole platform, the branding and all that, but we also created the editor behind it. So we love to make the tools for the correspondence as well. So we have total control of how they can present it, and they have the freedom to ask for certain ways of presenting or ways of writing it, and we can strip it down as a CMS really in a way that it's totally clean for them and it's just focused on what they want to do, and they can act more as conversation leaders. That's what we aim for with the editor. And what we see here is the last thing I wanted to show is more special project. So in this case, it's correspondent Jellebrand Kosjes, who was kind of fed up with everyone was always saying how things were wrong in the world. But he wanted to start a new initiative where you could really share with each other which good initiatives are out there. So for 12 months, he chose 12 themes for the 12 provinces of Holland, and have a way of approaching these people, and literally the members could put themselves on the map. So this is an example of a story that has a total different shape due to what you can do with the web, and a total new relationship of a correspondent with his audience.
Our time is up. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.